Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We will now convene the Health Subcommittee for Tuesday, January 31st, the year 2023. Ms. Adams, if you could please call the roll.
Representative Hicks. Here. Representative Jernigan.
Present.
Representative Leatherwood. Representative Martin. Here. Representative Mitchell. Here. Representative Sherrill. Here. Representative Terry. Representative Williams. Here. Chairman Hawk.
Am here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. The chair detects a quorum. This is our organizational meeting and our first business meeting of the Health Subcommittee for the year. So welcome, everyone. I do want to introduce a few folks who will be helping us today. Our committee secretary and my assistant, who makes sure I show up where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there, Ms. Shelley Adams. Thank you, Shelley. Our committee clerk from the clerk's office is Ailish Sweeney. All right, Ailish Sweeney, welcome. Thank you so much. Our committee analyst is Mike Critchfield right here to my right. Our committee attorney, we are blessed to have with us today, maybe for her one and only appearance, Anastasia Campbell, who is the director of legal services on the 9th floor, but we're going to receive our new committee attorney, Caroline Miller, tomorrow. I believe will be her first day. So she's going to be with us the next committee meeting. Sergeant at Arms, is Tommy in the? Tommy's going to be our normal Sergeant at Arms in the building, and of course Bobby's with us today. Our library and archivist in the back is Perry Davis with us. Hey, Perry, good to see you, man. Thank you very much for being here. Let's give these folks a round of applause. They do some really, really great work for our committees. Thank you so much. I do want to discuss a little bit about the main charge that I have is making sure that we maintain decorum and have honest and open debates, and that's what our plan is. The debates will be held with our committee members as well as with the sponsors of the legislation. We will not tolerate any outbursts from the audience. If any of those things do occur, you'll be asked to leave, and you'll free up a seat for someone else. So please recognize that utmost decorum is what we expect and plan to have with this committee going forward. Members, please ask to be recognized whenever issues come before you. If you have questions, please ask to be recognized, and I will recognize you, and then we will either have conversation with the bill sponsor or someone who is chosen to give some testimony today. So that will occur in that regard as well. Yeah, I think so. Chairman Terry, chairman of the full committee, do you have some things you'd like to add to us as well?
Thank you, Chairman. And as chairman of full committee, tomorrow in full committee, I will give all the policies for our full committee and how we expect things to be done in health. I will remind folks that in years past, I have handed out a process sheet to sponsors to help understand the rationale of their bill. And that includes what the premise of the problem is, of what we're looking to address, what the goals are of that bill, what are our options, what are the consequences, or the feasibility. My assistant will email that process sheet out once you've put the bill on notice, or she may actually send it out to all the offices today after this meeting. You can fill that out or not. I would prefer that you do it. It can help us to understand, or at least help me to understand the bill and potentially help me advocate for your bill. Again, I'll go over all the full policy committees and the health committee tomorrow.
Thank you, Chairman Terry. I will mention to us as well that typically the Tennessee Medical Association will have a doctor of the day. I believe that individual was not able to make it today for weather reasons, so we do not have a doctor of the day today. But typically on Tuesdays, we will announce a doctor of the day who is here for us as well to serve us. Does anyone on the committee have any personal orders they'd like to share before we begin? Seeing none, we will begin. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have a calendar before us, and we plan to go through the calendar as it is. We have item number 1 on the calendar is House Bill 66. It is appears to be an administration bill with the third name on there being Representative Butler. Representative Butler, you are recognized on House Bill 66. We have a motion. We have a second. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This is an administrative bill. Is that better? There we go. Apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This is an administrative bill to kind of clean up and simplify government as it is. And so Executive Order 10, signed by Governor Lee, transitioned the Tennessee Early Intervention System program from the Department of Education to the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And so basically we're going to transfer all of the duties from one department to another department, and that's what this bill does. It just cleans this up and simplifies the process.
Thank you very much, Representative Butler. Is this your first piece of legislation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I think Chairman Terry mentioned a few things about sending a statement request in as to why we've gone 250 years without this particular piece of legislation. Did you fill that statement of paper out for Chairman Terry?
I don't believe I've seen that piece of paper, Chairman.
Okay. Duly noted that he has not seen that piece of paper. So I think for future reference and efforts in the full committee, when you bring this bill in front of the full legislative House Health Committee, you may check with Chairman Terry's office on what documentation you may want to fill in after
Yes, Mr.
that.
Chairman.
Yes, sir. We have a motion and a second on House Bill 66. Any questions? Any comments? All those in favor of passage, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Your bill passes forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Congratulations. The second item on our calendar today is House Bill 64, which is one that I'm going to be carrying. So I'm going to hand the gavel off to Chairman Terry.
All right, we are on item number 2, House Bill 64. You have motion second. Chairman Hawkey, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman and members. House Bill 64 is an extension of our TANF Opportunity Act. If you'll remember the great work that Chairman Terry in the House and Senator Watson in the Senate did to create the Tennessee Opportunity Act, as we have convened our advisory council, our advisory board on TANF, and have accepted 7 different pilot programs across the state of Tennessee, which are beginning to do some tremendous work. I say that they are beginning to do this tremendous work, and it's going to take us a little bit more time to get these programs into their effective measurements or into a way that we can effectively measure them. So the Department of Human Services is looking for an extra year, a 4th year, to conduct both the pilot programs as well as create a really good measurement system so we'll know if these programs are being effective or not. That's phase 1. Phase 2 of this piece of legislation extends some of the local community investment dollars, when they have to be invested, which has typically been 12 years or was 12 years according to the original legislation. We're going to extend that out to 18 years, once again for the same reason, just to give the department, 12 months. Thank you, Chairman. From 12 months to 18 months. We're extending by a half a year the time frame to do that. So in a nutshell, that's what this legislation will do. It's just some date extensions, Chairman and members.
All right. Thank you. And before taking questions, just for everybody's benefit, the law that we passed last time, we put some very ambitious goals into that law. And as we've got into work, we realized that we need to clean that up a little bit. So that's part of what this is. So any questions by the members? Okay. Seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 64. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. Bill passes on to full Health Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And the record will indicate that Representative Chairman Leatherwood has joined us. So thank you, Chairman Leatherwood, for coming in. We are now going on to our third bill and final bill on the calendar today. That is House Bill 1 by Leader Lamberth. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized on the piece of legislation. We have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and there is an amendment that makes the bill.
Thank you very much. We do have several amendments that we'll deal with and take some brief explanation on the amendments. Would like to get the bill and the amendments in the proper position to vote on the legislation eventually. So we've got amendment number 1 is drafting code 2913. Do we have a motion on that? We have a motion. We have a second. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized on amendment number 1.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and if I may, since this makes the bill, with your permission, I have somewhat of a lengthier description of this than I normally would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
Members of the committee, there is a growing social contagion of gender dysphoria. Cases of gender dysphoria among American teens have risen dramatically in the last 5 years, almost certainly due in part to social media glorifying the process of transitioning. The ideology of gender-affirming care rushes kids to puberty blockers, hormones, and eventually surgery. The prevailing wisdom among some practitioners pushing transgender ideology is gender-affirming care, which entails indulging the child's perception of his or her sex. Again, their perception of his or her sex. In other words, if a little boy says he's a little girl, doctors should immediately take steps to make his body like a girl's body. This leads to a willingness to prescribe puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and even surgeries. A hesitance to prescribe these medical procedures recently could even be deemed transphobic in some circles. That is something we've never seen before. The back and forth within the medical community before this time has been a healthy discussion on how children can best be assisted through any of these issues. These medical procedures cause serious and lifelong harms and carry additional risks. Given the novelty of the medical procedures, provided only in the last decade or so on a large scale, there's no reliable evidence of any long-term benefit. I repeat that, of any long-term benefit. And there is strong evidence of the severe risk, including permanent sterilization, total loss of adult sexual function, bone loss, depression, and many other harms. In addition, the unknown risk associated with these medical procedures counsel further hesitation for prescribing experimental drugs and surgery to children. Everything in this bill only involves children. Children and adolescents cannot provide informed consent for these medical procedures. Given the developmental stage of the child-adolescent brain, kids are not capable of fully comprehending the true long-term risks of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. A growing number of detransitioners, and you'll hear from one very brave young lady today, have come forward expressing regret about puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries that were rushed upon them as minors. Financial incentives associated with these medical procedures potentially put children and adolescents at risk. Given the costs associated with many of these medical procedures, there's a serious risk that financial incentives, rather than evidence-based decisions, drive the treatment process for children and adolescents suffering from gender dysphoria. The very advice that they are getting from the folks that they trust most sometimes can be tainted by financial goals. Health authorities in countries such as Sweden, Finland, Japan, and the United Kingdom have also restricted provisions of these medical procedures to minors. Those countries have been down this road, and they've thoroughly and systematically reviewed the existing medical evidence and have found no reliable evidence that the benefits of these procedures for kids outweigh the risks. Dealing with this amendment in this bill, the bill would prohibit these dangerous medical procedures for minors. The bill prohibits the provision of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgeries to minors for the purpose of changing a minor's body to match his or her gender identity, or to treat discomfort or distress arising from a discordance between the minor's sex and asserted identity. It's the only thing it blocks. Many of these surgical procedures, many of these medications are needed for some children. This bill would merely keep them from being misused for something they were never designed to do. The bill would impose licensing sanctions on healthcare providers that perform these medical procedures on minors. The bill makes the provision of these medical procedures a potential threat to public health, safety, and welfare, and thus subjects providers to sanctions by their regulatory authorities. The bill would create a private cause of action for minors against the healthcare provider who subjected the minor to the prohibited medical procedure. Again, if this bill passes, these will be prohibited medical procedures. Thus, the licensing agencies would have the authority to act on any medical provider that was going contrary to the law. The bill would create a 30-year statute of limitation period for this cause of action. So in other words, if the regulatory actions don't work, then there would be a lawsuit that a child or child's family would have available to them for a period of 30 years on the statute of limitations. The bill will grant the Attorney General and Reporter enforcement authority. The bill creates a right of action for the Attorney General and Reporter to sue for injunctive relief and civil penalties against healthcare providers that violate this statute as an additional protection. The bill would prohibit distributing hormones or puberty blockers to minors unless a healthcare provider is otherwise authorized to do so. The bill ensures that these drugs, when they are legal and not distributed to minors outside of the normal medical system, are fine. But I've sure seen reports on the news of individuals that are shipping drugs across state lines or providing them in ways that are not from their doctor, not from their pharmacist, not from their healthcare provider. It's absolutely prohibited. But a doctor who prescribes those medications for needed medical procedures absolutely would still be able to. The bill would clarify that performing these medical procedures on minors can constitute abuse. And we are not talking about criminal abuse. We are talking about how custodial decisions are made. We're talking about administrative findings, that type of thing. There's nothing in this bill that has any direct criminal penalty whatsoever. All of this is administrative and civil in nature. This bill and this amendment does not prohibit mental health treatment for gender dysphoria. Mental health treatment is what these children need. They need the love and support of their families and their communities and their doctors so that they can progress through adolescence properly and grow into their bodies so that they are comfortable with whoever they are as an adult. And once an adult, if they wish to take certain medications or they wish to alter their body through medical procedures, that is absolutely their choice as an adult. But while their body is still forming as an adolescent, these procedures would not be allowed. Gender dysphoria is a mental health condition, and it should therefore be treated like any other mental health condition through psychotherapy, counseling, and other appropriate medical interventions. This bill prohibits only the medical procedures of providing puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgeries for the purposes of transition. That's all it does. It does not increase the risk of suicide for those suffering from gender dysphoria. That is one of those urban legends you're going to hear people throw around. The opposite is in fact true. There is no reliable evidence that shows the prohibited medical procedures cause a reduction in the suicide risk among children who identify as transgender or who experience gender dysphoria. And there is absolutely reason to suspect that these procedures could actually contribute to suicidal behavior. When you tell a child that cutting off or adding on parts to their body are going to help them with how they feel, it is simply not true. And that's not me saying that. That's other countries and that's medical professionals for decades that have helped guide children through gender dysphoria. It is a mental health condition, and the best way to assist is to make sure they get the mental health treatment that they need to be able to get to adulthood, and then they can make whatever decision that they would like. It does not discriminate against children who identify as transgender. This bill does not represent animus toward or disapproval of children who identify as transgender or who experience gender dysphoria. To the contrary, the purpose of this bill is precisely to protect those children by assuring they get the mental health treatment they need, rather than be subjected to unproven, dangerous, and life-altering medical procedures. Once you go down this road, there is no coming back. These medications are not temporary. Again, the effects of them can be permanent. You don't have to take my word for it. It's literally on the warning labels. These are not medications that children should have unless it is medically necessary. And I don't even have to address how permanent the surgeries are. There's obviously no coming back from that. And lastly, it does not prohibit adults from receiving these treatments. Puberty is a challenging stage of development, and many minors who express a transgender identity will desist from that identity by the time they are adults. Minors are generally not able to appreciate the long-term consequences for their health and ability to have children naturally. This bill protects minors from undergoing life-altering procedures that they might someday regret, but this bill does not interfere with the medical decisions adults make for themselves. Mr. Chairman, that is what the amendment does.
Thank you very much, Leader Lambert. Any questions on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, you said you had testimony? Are we going to listen to testimony if it gets on the bill? Or are you doing it now, or what?
The chair would like to get the bill in the proper posture that we can discuss and debate the bill in its entirety as amended, and then we're going to go to testimony after that.
But you want questions on the amendment now?
If there are questions on the amendment, certainly now.
Okay.
The amendatory language as presented by Leader Lamberth right now.
Okay. I do have. I have
Chairman
one-
Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I have one question and then one, I think, more of a concern. Leader, in your amendment, you talk about, I guess you're adding a section 6833-104, which is the distribution of hormones and puberty blockers to a minor. And I find the paragraph a little bit cumbersome. Can you walk me through about where the discretion that a doctor has, or when can they practice medicine and when can they not, I guess, is my question. What can they do and what can they not do in regard to these puberty blockers and hormones?
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized, and I'm just making sure that we're on the right section. Are we on the prohibition section or the distribution section, Chairman Jernigan?
I think it's got its own section.
Okay.
With
6833-104, is
it's on
that?
page 7.
Okay.
Is that right?
Can you give me the section of code one more time? 6833-104.
6833-104.
Okay. Okay. Leader Lamberth, if you're ready.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for that question. So 6833-104, at the very end of that, it says, to the minor pursuant to this chapter. So all of the exceptions that are provided under where you see prohibitions and then the exceptions and definitional parts of this statute, if it becomes a statute, would apply to that. And so literally every single time that they are practicing medicine, they absolutely can practice medicine. When they are exiting that arena and experimenting on these children, which is what some of these new procedures are. There's just simply not a basis of science behind doing surgery or distributing puberty blockers to these children before you've gone through all of the other stages of mental health treatment and assistance before you get to that point, potentially somewhere in adulthood. So all of the same exceptions that apply to the other prohibitions would still apply to this section.
Chairman Jernigan.
Right. Okay. Medical necessity aside, correct? Then we're talking about if a minor goes through the counseling, they go through the, I guess my question is, there are conditions out there, right, that a child is born without a gender, and they have to issue some kind of hormonal medication. And these are, I mean, the exceptions is what I'm looking for. Where's the discretion for the doctor before they violate this? I understand you're referring back to the language that I'm talking about, which I think is what I'm finding to be cumbersome.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
And Mr. Chairman, it's everything from 6833-103 on page 5 all the way through on page 6. And so those prohibitions, they're very specific on what is prohibited. And then below that, just as kind of a belt and suspenders approach, it makes it very clear. It says it is not a violation of subsection A if a healthcare provider knowingly performs or offers to perform a medical procedure on or administers or offers to administer a medical procedure to a minor if the performance or administration of medical procedure is to treat a minor's congenital defect, precocious puberty, disease, or physical injury, or the performance or administration of the medical procedure on the minor began prior to the effective date of this act and concludes on or before March 31st, 2024. And then there's even an exception to that, where if basically the doctor in there's a additional section about 2 pages over where they can make a determination that it potentially would be harmful to take a child off of these hormones already on it. So there's not only definitional, but then exceptions built within that definition to ensure if there is a doctor that is treating precocious puberty or any other medical disease, then they are absolutely permitted to do so.
Okay, thank you for the, can we just go back and forth? Or-
Chairman Jardigan, you're recognized. For back and forth, I'll be fine with that. Back and forth is fine.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the clarification, which leads me to my second question / concern, and it's and you mentioned that the harmful part, that they need to take that in consideration about removing off of hormones. You've kind of got a 1 year, you're trying to have an off-ramp here and a hard date of 1 year to have the minors off of the hormones. I struggle with a hard date in that each individual, on a case-by-case basis, we're moving away from the doctor practicing medicine to a hard date. And that hard date could be harmful, from what you just mentioned earlier. I would be more comfortable leaving in discretion as long as the doctor had an in-ramp of, hey, this is the condition, this is the diagnosis, this is where we want to move forward. It's going to be 2 years. It's going to be, as long as there was something in writing. That's a concern that I have, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question. It is exactly what we put in on page 6 in the amendment. Okay. Under 6833-103, it's subpart B3. For purposes of subdivision B1B, which is what you were referencing, the minor's treating physician must certify in writing that in the physician's good faith medical judgment, based upon the facts known to the physician at the time, ending the medical procedure will be harmful to the minor. The certification must include the findings supporting the certification and must be made as part of the minor's medical record. And so exactly what you described is what we built into this statute. If you currently are a minor in the state of Tennessee and are on some of these hormones, it can be harmful to, just cold turkey take someone off of these. Now, at the same time, these hormones are harming that child. I mean, everything I mentioned earlier, where it is potentially sterilizing them, it is hurting their bone density, it is affecting everything about them. But there is a process to stair-step someone off of these. And unfortunately for those children that are already on these hormones right now, they're going to be harmed either way. And so we did allow for a doctor to do exactly what you mentioned so that they can individualize the treatment for that patient, which is exactly what they should do. Now, after that, obviously no children should be on these hormones and for purposes of what's drawn out in this bill, and then that will no longer be an issue.
Follow up, Chairman Jardigan.
No, that's, I appreciate your explanation, and I'm probably going to go with the doctor that went to school for it. I respect your opinion, but Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time, and I may have a follow-up question, but thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Sponsor. I want to, Mr. Chairman, I've got several questions, so can we do the back and forth as well? So,
The chair will entertain that unless he gets out of hand.
okay.
He's met us before.
So I want to break this down into two areas. Areas where we can possibly agree on certain parts of your bill, and other areas where we can't. And one area, let's just start with the surgical part. So you're saying, so I'm not mischaracterizing your bill. So what surgeries are you prohibiting? And it will just go ahead. Tell me what surgeries you're prohibiting.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Medical procedure means on page 4, surgically removing, modifying, altering, or entering into tissues, cavities, or organs of a human being, or prescribing, administering, or dispensing any puberty blocker or hormone to a human being. Then it goes on to that under prohibitions on page 5. A healthcare provider shall not knowingly perform or offer to perform on a minor or administer or offer to administer to a minor a medical procedure as previously defined if the performance or administration of the procedure is for the purpose of enabling a minor to identify with or live as a purported identity inconsistent with the minor's sex, or treating purported discomfort or distress from a discordance between the minor's sex and asserted identity. Then it goes on to there to lay out some additional subsections.
Okay, so I think we can agree there because that's not happening. So that's just not happening. There's zero record of any genitalia surgery at any major medical facility in Nashville. I don't know if it's happening somewhere else.
Leader Lambert, a chance to respond. Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
If I may, sir, with all due respect, I've spoken directly with medical providers that have conducted double mastectomies on young ladies, and there is, whether you're cutting off body parts of a young lady or a young gentleman.
Did you hear what I said? Genitalia.
Well, sir, with all due respect, regardless of what
Okay,
parts of a body,
but-
I do not consider one more important than the other.
I'm trying to get a part where we can agree. If you will
Gentlemen,
listen
this is
to the
this is not
medical
the direction
terms.
we're going to go.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not going to go this back and forth. Representative Mitchell, if you get a question, we'll ask the question now, and we're
Okay.
going to clean the slate and start over again.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Representative
All right.
Mitchell, you're recognized.
Okay, so I'll make it simple. Okay, there's been no surgery below the belt of a male or female at a major medical facility in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, there has been last year or the year before, and we spoke about this, there were 5 cases where a child qualified for the mastectomy if they so choose. I don't know if any of those 5 happened between the ages of 16 and 18, but that it's very small. So if, we want to ban those surgeries, so be it. But I just wanted to get on record that the other is not happening. So we can ban that. We can ban what's not happening. I don't guess it's going to matter. So now let's go on to the other part, which I think is the most harmful to
Excuse
children.
me, Representative Mitchell. Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my friend from Davidson County, one, I don't know that you and I can make that broad statement. I've not been in every surgical facility in the state of Tennessee. I've not been with every doctor and every patient in the state of Tennessee. And I want to be crystal clear, this bill is not sexist. With all due respect, sir, the statement that you just made said it was fine to have to cut off both breasts of a healthy young lady, but somehow or another a surgery below the belt is not okay. Both are harmful to these children. So I know you were trying to find a point where we may agree. Hopefully we may just agree that any surgery of this type should not be done, and then possibly be able to move on and not get into the weeds of whether you wish to make a distinction between a young boy and a young girl. I am not.
Representative Mitchell, I think as we move forward, we're going to agree that you both have different feelings on this piece of legislation. Yeah. Representative Mitchell, as you make your statements, I'm going to ask that you, if you make an outrageous statement, the sponsor of the legislation is going to come back and want to respond to any outrageous statement. So I would like to have questions asked as opposed to statements of your thoughts on this particular issue. So let's try to stick to questions and answers as we move forward.
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Chair. And I'm trying to be quite respectful, and
Certainly.
and I'm going to respond to what he said and ask him a question because he just called me sexist. So could you please tell the committee what gynecomastia is?
So
You
by
know
the
what that
way,
is?
So I didn't call you sexist, sir. Your comments did.
Okay, well, you tell the committee what that is, and then I'm going to prove you wrong.
Sir, I'm not going to define that. If you have a question about the bill, I'll be glad to go
Okay,
through that.
well,
Gentlemen, you've got about 30 seconds, and we're going to shut this down, okay?
Okay.
Now, if you've got a question for the sponsor, then I suggest you ask the question. Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Okay, gynecomastia is a common condition that causes boys and men's breasts to swell larger than normal, and it is a common medical procedure for use in adults for physicians if a child and a parent so deem it, and the doctor sees fit for a male to have a mastectomy. So again, I was not choosing males and females, but if we do the research, unintended consequences of bills that we're not educated on can harm children. And I'm just trying to make certain we know everything we're talking about before we jump and do things. So, I'm trying to be respectful, but let's talk about all these issues. We're making a major decision here on the health care of a lot of Tennesseans that are affecting their physical as well as mental health, and just go back to something was said earlier. Every major medical association has agreed that these procedures and this area of medicine is accepted by the American Pediatric Association, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatry Association. I mean, there's not one organization that is, as like you said, saying that there's not enough research. That's just not true. So on the puberty blockers, you're saying, they're irreversible. Committee, that's just not true. It's just not true. Now, cross puberty blockers, there is a small chance of infertility, which you did address that. But I don't know, every time I see a drug commercial on TV, at the end of it, they list 14 things that it could do to me. And I'm like, man, do I really want to risk that drug, But, there's a chance of a lot of things. But going down this road of just stopping all of this hormone treatment for these children that so many medical associations have said is helpful. I mean, I come to this committee, I'm looking at this committee, there's 2 physicians on this committee. The rest of us have to do our research as best we can, and I have to listen to medical professionals. Yeah, did a doctor bring you this bill? Was this idea come from a medical professional?
Leader Lamberth.
Sir, my name's at the top of this bill. I filed it. That's where the bill comes from.
Any more questions, Representative Mitchell?
No, that's fine. If I've proven my point with the one area where he called me sexist.
Are we ready to vote on amendment number 1? Placing amendment number 1 on the bill. Once again, that drafting code is 2913. All those in favor of placing that amendment on the bill, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no.
No.
If you wish to be recorded as a no, please tell Ms. Adams and she'll record you as a no. Amendment 1 goes on. We are now going to amendment number 2 on the legislation, which is an amendment that I have, and I'm going to hand off the gavel to Chairman Terry.
All right, we have before us amendment number 2. It is amendment 002897. Chairman Hogg, you have a motion and a second.
Thank you very much, Chairman. One of the sections of this piece of legislation actually has a 30-year look back. In discussion with the sponsor of the amendment and sponsor of the bill and some other members on the committee, I feel that it may be good to have a 10-year look back or a 10-year statute of limitations on this particular piece of legislation. So in a nutshell, that is what this amendment will do, and certainly ask passage for that.
Any questions? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, 30 years was as long as we could possibly consider, and I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I'm at the will of the committee. I do hope that it has still the 10 years from the death of the minor, if that were to occur, and then 10 years from the age of maturity.
Chairman Hawk, you recognize.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As indicated by legal staff, that is accurate. What you just portrayed is accurate with this amendment, so that is correct.
Okay. Any further questions on the amendment? Seeing none, We are voting on to add Amendment 002897 to the bill. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Amendment goes on the bill.
Thank you, Chairman, members. All right, we now have a third amendment placed before the committee. Representative Mitchell, you would like to present amendment coded 3210?
Mr. Chairman, can we roll that to the hill of the amendments and take up the other one first?
Any objection? No objection. That request will be granted. We're now on what is listed as amendment number 4 by Representative Mitchell. Drafting code is 3118. Representative Mitchell, you are recognized. Do we have a motion? Second. We have a motion and a second.
Motion.
You are recognized.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just to allow, this is going back to what we can agree on and what we can disagree on this bill. This is, just allowing the hormone therapy and treatments and not touching any part of his bill that outlaws the surgeries. So I'm just bringing this forth to just to save lives, bottom line. I've got research paper after research paper over here from medical organizations for children saying that how it's going to be harmful to mental health of these children and how transgender children's suicide rate is astronomically higher than those of non-transgender children. And for us to do something that could harm them as well, I think allowing this treatment will save lives. And like I said,
Representative Mitchell, are we on the amendment?
Yes, sir. I'm telling what the hormone treatment will do if we allow it.
Are we on the amendment?
Yes, sir. So if we allow that, like I said, it's reversible. The sponsor of the bill is correct. The one area that there is a risk is infertility, and mostly that's male infertility. So I'm trying to be honest and straightforward, good and bad on both sides. That is a risk, but the number of lives it could save of these children is countless. And I don't want to be a part of anything that I think could harm a child, especially with suicide. So with that being said, I put forth this amendment, and like I said, his surgeries, that's not happening anyway, so we can outlaw something that's not happening, but let's take care of these children.
You've heard the description of amendment number 4, which is coded 3118. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Anyone opposed? No. The noes have it. The amendment fails. We are now back on amendment number 3. Representative Mitchell, you are recognized on amendment number 3 in the pack, coded 3210.
Yeah, motion.
Have a motion to second. You're recognized.
Yeah, this is an easy amendment. Since we're outlawing surgeries, I just thought we would outlaw cosmetic surgeries performed on minors. And before anyone speaks and tries to mischaracterize what this cosmetic surgery is, there's a difference between cosmetic surgery, reconstructive surgery, which is medically necessary surgery. Cosmetic surgery would be getting someone's nose fixed or breast implants. And that's what this amendment will take care of. Cosmetic plastic surgeries are not medically necessary, and reconstructive surgery is medically necessary. So that's the difference before anyone tries to mischaracterize what this amendment does. We're just trying to stop children, they don't need it. You don't need a nose job or breast implants to I don't know what that would be necessary for in our society. So I think they just should have to wait till 18 to do that. Thank you.
You've heard the description of the amendment. Leader Lamberth, forgive me, I did not recognize you on the last amendment. I apologize. Leader Lamberth, this is your bill. You wish to speak on this amendment?
Yes, sir, only briefly. I have seen this amendment. The language is broad enough that my concern is exactly what my friend from Davidson County has indicated he thought would be mischaracterized. Really, when you're talking about cosmetic surgeries, we're talking about cleft palate, we're talking about breast reconstruction after a child has recovered from, potentially cancer. We're talking about breast reduction. Some of these fall under medically necessary and some of them do not. I am not willing to leave that type of decision up to the whims of an insurance company somewhere as to whether or not it's cosmetic or it's medically necessary. If these children have gone through some of these horrible diseases and they need cosmetic surgery, I don't know what possible societal interest or policy provision other than trying to be sarcastic about the underlying bill that this amendment would possibly affect. But I do think it would definitely negatively affect multiple children's lives in this state that may have what I would consider a medically necessary or the sponsor would consider a medically necessary cosmetic procedure. But at the same time, just because some insurance company somewhere or somebody else found that it wasn't, this would bar that. And I just don't think that's a road we should go down.
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, and yes, Mr. Chairman, and I think this legislature in the past have made sure that insurance companies don't get to make that decision when people who survive breast cancer, that reconstructive, not cosmetic, that reconstructive surgery is covered, and a cleft palate, that reconstructive surgery is covered. So no, I think my bill is very clear. It says cosmetic. We all know what cosmetic is, so it's very clear, folks. So these surgeries are being performed for no reason whatsoever.
We're on amendment number 3, drafting code 3210. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. No. The noes have it. Your amendment fails. We are back on the bill as amended with amendment number 1 and amendment number 2. Leader Lambert, thank you very much. We do have a few folks who have put their name on a list to speak, and I will remind you we only have the room for an hour and a half when we begin, so we do have a limited amount of time in the room. We have 3 speakers who would like to speak on the particular issue. I will set some ground rules for us. We will begin a timer for 3 minutes whenever individuals do begin their comments. Individuals, when you come to speak before us, please state your name, state your profession, state your expertise on this particular issue, and then address the committee. The committee will have an opportunity to ask some questions on comments you may have made. Typically, we will let this go on a little bit longer, but again, we do not have the room for an infinite amount of time, so that will be limited as well. First on the list, we have a gentleman by the name of Stephen Puckett. Mr. Puckett, you're recognized. You can come to either the podium. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Thank you. I was just reminded at the moment we need to go out of session. So we are out of session right now. We are going to recognize Mr. Stephen Puckett. If you could please tell us who you are, who you're with, and your expertise on this issue. Mr. Puckett, you are recognized out of session.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My voice is a little bit stronger as I was working on getting the crud cleaned out there, because the infamous crud lasts long. The crud lasts longer than the virus. My name is Stephen Puckett. I hold a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration with a specialization in economics, which provides me with strong knowledge of social perception and issues that, with this particular legislation, also can include some of the social psychology of individuals who go through this. That being said, this with the amendments that the sponsor and I do happen to work for a living, I'm going to waive my first objection. I had 3 objections originally due to the fact I have not been able to fully vet the language to see if he had cleared up some of those issues. That being said, also the second objection, because I'm going to waive my second objection because Leader Lamberth was able to find a recognized victim of the surgery and be able to present them in the committee, given that the rhetoric leading up to this was very rancorous to the point that I thought I was concerned today I was going to have to say the word blood libel twice in one day. Thankfully, he brought a witness of an actual injury in order to demonstrate the need. Unfortunately, the third objection still stands, which is actually a national security objection in which my economics background really leans into. This legislation was announced after an incident involving bomb threats made to Boston Children's Hospital that was incited by a conservative activist who was trying to get this type of legislation brought into committee. The problem with that is that when those type of events occur, typically individuals who have an interest in that issue will say that they have that they condemn the attack, they are calling for injury, they are calling for accountability, and that the individual and that they share the interest and will bring it up. The problem with this legislation is that the sponsor did not do that. Instead, he brought this legislation announced it as a reward for such action. Individuals outside of this committee.
Mr. Puckett, thank you very much. Your 3 minutes are up. Are you in favor or opposed to this legislation?
I'm sorry. I am opposed to it on the grounds that it could jeopardize our national security, as individuals could see it as an endorsement of such violence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Our next speaker who is asked to speak before us today is Chase, forgive me if I mispronounce this, Chase Strangio? Strangio. Mr. Strangio, if you could please tell us who you are, who you're with, and your expertise on this particular issue, and we'll start the 3 minutes. Mr. Strangio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Chase Strangio. I am testifying in opposition to the bill on behalf of the ACLU and the ACLU of Tennessee. I am Deputy Director for Transgender Justice at the ACLU. I have been an attorney at the ACLU for 10 years. I am currently lead counsel in the ACLU's challenge to Arkansas's ban on care that looks a lot like this one, as well as in ACLU's challenge to Texas's child abuse directives that look similar to the amendments that have just been passed by this committee. So I speak to you today as someone who is actively litigating these issues about the constitutional implications as well as the cost to the state of Tennessee and Tennessee taxpayers. Courts across the country have recognized that bills like this impermissibly violate the equal protection and due process rights of adolescents, doctors, and their parents. The Northern District of Alabama, the 8th Circuit, and the Supreme Court of Texas have all enjoined measures like this one because they have found that they represent government overreach and intrude upon the fundamental rights of parents to govern the medical decision-making of their minor children, as well as the equal protection rights of transgender adolescents and the doctors who care for them. I just got out of a 2-week trial in Arkansas in which many of the legislative findings that are in this bill were tested, in which they were found to be categorically untrue. And just by way of a few examples, it is not true that this medical care is experimental, not in the scientific nor in the colloquial sense. There are decades of studies testing the efficacy and safety of this treatment. It is also not true, as the amendment states, that care has been banned in Finland, Sweden, or the United Kingdom. And to the contrary, in the United Kingdom, care has been expanded to regional centers. And Dr. Cass, who is the author of the Cass report, who is often cited in support of legislation like this, has made clear that her report has been misrepresented. And rather than being inconsistent with medical standards, this medical treatment is provided pursuant to medical standards that are supported, as the Representative Mitchell said, by every major medical association. in the United States. Because this law infringes the fundamental rights of parents and discriminates based on sex and transgender status, it triggers strict scrutiny, or at least heightened scrutiny, which means it will be the government's burden to defend it in court. And Tennessee, like Alabama, like Texas, like Arkansas, will not be able to do so. Already in Arkansas, costs and fees alone for plaintiffs have been over $3 million. The state of Alabama has not yet reached trial and has spent $1.7 million defending their bill, to say nothing of the cost they will likely owe to plaintiffs due to attorney's fees. And because I only have a short amount of time, I want to quickly address the issue of the child abuse. The sponsor of the bill indicated that there are no criminal penalties attached, but abuse and neglect proceedings are civil. I cannot think of a greater intrusion into the fundamental rights of parents than the prospect of losing custody of one's child.
Gentlemen, your time is up, but I'll give you 30 more seconds. Please, please, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate it. And I just want to say, and I know that we'll be hearing from Ms. Cole later, and I've heard her speak before. I don't believe she has ever said that her parents are to blame. And what is at risk of happening is that parents who are following the medical advice of doctors are at risk of losing their children. Multiple people were supposed to come here today to testify, but they were too afraid. I am concerned about what this means for families in Tennessee and for the cost that this will inevitably bestow on taxpayers. And
Chairman Leatherwood, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. Given your experience with similar legislation in other states, I wonder, in your opinion, what might remedy the problems with this legislation?
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. So just two parts. I will say that as someone who is transgender myself, who has benefited from this care, whose life has been saved by this care, I oppose this bill in its entirety. I will say what concerns me perhaps most in this moment is the amendment about the child abuse. I am worried that it sets a slippery slope. At what point is some other medical decision that parents make? Every time I go to the pediatrician, I ask a lot of questions about my 10-year-old, and there aren't always answers. There isn't always clarity about what something might look like in 5 years, in 7 years. We don't know a lot in medicine. And so what we're saying here is that the state might come in and punish a parent who is trying to do right by their child, a parent who loves their child, as I know all of us as parents do. And when our children are suffering, it is excruciating. I think that we can agree on that. And the last thing that we need to be doing is punishing parents for trying to help their children. And it is not through the criminal law that the most egregious forms of punishment sometimes happen to parents, because abuse and neglect proceedings are civil in nature. So I think that is something that this committee should look very seriously at, whether right now or whether when the committee takes it up as the full committee. I think this is something that we have never seen, quite frankly, in the way in which the government regulates medicine, to categorically deem something as potential child abuse. And I will say, for those of you who are lawyers, the Supreme Court of Texas, the Eighth Circuit, these are not places where so-called transgender ideology has taken hold. Governor Hutchinson in Arkansas vetoed a similar piece of legislation because he said this represents vast government overreach. And I can't think, hear a lot about parents' rights. What about the rights of parents who are trying to help their suffering children? And even if we disagree about ultimately the efficacy or the safety of this care, or whether it's good or bad to be transgender, I happen to think it's a normal variation of human existence. But even if we disagree about that, these are parents whose kids are hurting.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Last individual on our list is Chloe Cole. Chloe, if you could please step up. Once again, as we've mentioned as well, you've got 3 minutes, but if any questions come from the committee members, we can certainly entertain a few minutes longer. So, Ms. Cole, if you could please tell us who you are and your expertise on this particular issue. You're recognized.
My name is Chloe Cole, and I am an 18-year-old detransitioner who fell victim to gender-affirming care as a minor, and I am testifying in favor of this bill. At the age of 12, I began to socially transition from a girl into a male identity and was diagnosed with gender dysphoria after my 13th birthday. After only half a year later, I had my puberty blocked and I was put on testosterone before undergoing a double mastectomy at 15, just after my sophomore year of high school ended. If you were to ask if you were to ask an activist what the ideal conditions for transitioning are, they would probably answer with similar conditions to mine. Living in an area where medical transition is easily accessible, having a supportive family and group of friends, and starting treatment as young as possible. I fulfill all this criteria, and yet my transition was still a failure. So what went wrong? The problem lies with me having been put through the process of medical transition in the first place, because it is never appropriate for children in any capacity. From the very beginning, the doctors were negligent. They treated me as if I were an adult who was capable of making informed lifelong decisions that would affect every area of my life, from socialization and relationships to sexual function and my ability to have children. They did not present any other option to treat my dysphoria to me or my parents, but they did lie to my parents behind my back and tell them that I would be at risk of suicide were I not allowed to transition. I wasn't suicidal until I underwent treatments. I had several comorbidities that went under the radar or were completely dismissed. I had undiagnosed autism and body dysmorphia. You might think this means that I was misdiagnosed or that I never had gender dysphoria in the first place, but I still experience it to this day. The only thing that has improved it long term was simply living in my body with no intervention, no medication, just the truth. Over the course of my transition, I became extremely depressed to the point of my grades and school attendance dropping, and I experienced severe paranoia and suicidal ideation. I was in such poor condition that my school performance suffered greatly, and I had dropped out of high school several times. But the damage to my mind was nothing compared to what was done to my body. The complications from the puberty blockers, testosterone, and surgery are all impacting my day-to-day life long afterward, in ways that I didn't even know were possible. The blockers had given me joint and back pains, and the testosterone caused me to develop issues in my urinary tract, leaving me prone to infection and dehydration. The status of my fertility is currently unknown, but I do not have the choice of breastfeeding my children anymore. I have to wear bandages over my chest every single day because the areolar grafts they used in my mastectomy started to fail and leak fluid 2 years post-op. The greatest right that children have is to grow up into healthy, functional adults who are able to live fulfilling lives and make their own choices. By lying to and experimenting on children and interfering with the development of their bodies and minds, we are impeding on this God-given right. You know what you need to do. Thank you for standing up for the protection of children.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Any questions or comments for Chloe? Chloe, tell me a little more the physical aspects, your bone development, the pain that you've gone through. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And you mentioned the urinary tract,
Yeah.
the infections, and can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, so from the blockers, while I was on them, I experienced some side effects that were temporary, and they only lasted for the duration that I was on them, including hot flashes, not quite dissimilar from those that women in menopause experience, and my entire body would itch, and I would, sometimes just while breathing, I would hear like a loud crack in my neck and back, and that stopped after I've gone off of it, but what hasn't stopped is that I've experienced joint pains, mainly in my arms and my hands, and my back and neck. About a year of taking testosterone, I started to experience some urinary tract issues, mainly infections, sometimes blood in my urinary tract as well. This started to worsen over the course of my transition, and temporarily after going off of the testosterone, I would get larger blood clots and sometimes tissue in my urine. That has since gone away, but I still experience frequent urination, dehydration, and occasionally infections.
Last question, Chloe. How old are you now?
I'm 18.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any more
Thank you.
questions? Thank you very much, Chloe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back in session. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to thank Chloe for coming down here. I mean, look, at 18 years old, I don't know how any of us could come in here in a room full of strangers, knowing that it's been videotaped, and share some of the most private things that could ever happen to somebody. But she also described much better than I can on why no child should be put through this. Do the mental health treatment. Love these children, support these children, get them through adolescence. Just get them to 18, and then they can make whatever decision that they want to. I will mention to our friend from the ACLU, their batting average at the Supreme Court's about 50%. So with all due respect to his prediction that this bill will be overturned, I predict that it will be upheld.
Thank you very much. We are on the bill as amended. Questions or comments? Representative Mitchell, you're recognized, then Representative Sherrill after that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. All I've got to say is, my closing on this is major medical associations, including the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, also agree that gender-affirming care is clinically appropriate for children and adults and can be life-saving. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services calls gender-affirming care crucial to the overall health and well-being for transgender youth. Thank you.
And I'm going to make a request before we go forward. The request is going to be that we roll the two amendments that we have into a single amendment should this bill go forward to full committee. I'll make that request of legal. Okay. Representative Sherrill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Leader Lambert, for bringing this bill today. Just say a few things, not no questions to it, but just because the associations say that this is okay to do, I just can't believe that we're having this discussion today. We've got to protect our children some way. And you may be out there supporting what Leader Lambert is, the bill that he's bringing, and you may be against it, but we've got to protect our children. We're having this debate today, and you, maybe there is children listening, and you may not know, or you may not think you know what you are today. And if you don't know, and our preacher would say, if you don't know what you are, a boy or girl, a male or female, just go in the bathroom and take your clothes off and look in the mirror, and you'll find out. You'll find out what you are. If you look in the mirror, you'll find out. I appreciate you very much, Leader Lambert, for trying to protect our children as well as others that's sitting on this committee. Thank you very much, Leader Lambert.
Thank you. Chairman Dr. Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. And I didn't get to say this while we were out of session, but I just wanted to thank both Chase and Chloe for coming and testifying today and putting themselves in the position and talking about their conditions and their lives. And I appreciate that. I respect that. So I just want to get that on the record.
Thank you. I want to apologize to Mike on my right for bursting his eardrum with my last hit at the gavel. I apologize to him. This is his first time being research analyst. Seeing no further questions or comments, are we ready to vote? The question is called. All those in favor of sending House Bill 1 to full health committee, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. Please let Ms. Adams know if you wish to vote no. Your bill passes. It moves forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, no other business to come before this subcommittee. We are adjourned.